Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special edition of the Panjwai Podcast Live. We're joined today by a contingent of Canadian veterans, and we're going to kind of let them run this show and do their thing. But to kick off, we're going to introduce our guest co-host for today, Chance Burles.
Yo, how goes it?
He's been on before. He's popped in here and there, and he's been on an episode of the Panjwai Podcast. He's on his podcast as well. So it's pretty cool. Chance, I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce you to the guests that you've invited on today, starting with Mark Campbell.
Absolutely. So we have my good friend Mark Campbell here. He is a former major in the PPCLI, which is the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, which is a bit of a mouthful. Anyway, it is one of our two. We only have the two regiments, right, in Canada, Mark?
English speaking, yeah.
English speaking, right, and then we got the Bantus, so that's right.
And special ops and soft guys, but they're kind of separate.
Yeah. So you were there you went to Afghanistan in 02 off Apollo and 08 off Archer.
Correct. Yep.
All right. And what were your two different jobs there?
First time I went over, I was commanding combat support company in 3 PPCLI battle group. So third battalion of the Patricias, we formed a battle group, which is it's like a mini brigade combat team. So we tack on a squadron of engineers and a squadron of armored reconnaissance and so on and so forth. So it's bigger than just a battalion. And we were embedded with 3rd Brigade of the 101st, 187 BCT Rakkasans. So I spent 6 months as a pseudo Rakkasan, actually, embedded with 3rd Brigade of the 101st, doing a combination of base defense at CAF when it was still brand new, and then away missions, doing combat air assaults into, first was into Shaikat, Tora Bora, and then Zabul province. So three combat air assaults in total. The first one at the tail of Op Anaconda, and then in the second tour, I was commanding the operational mentoring and liaison team, which is our embedded training teams for the train the trainer for the Afghans. So I was mentoring an Afghan Kandak commander, battalion commander. And I had 4 teams under me of 4 men each, consisting of a captain, a warrant officer, and 2 corporal privates. And when they mentored the rifle companies within the Kandak, so a little different, completely different mission set for the second tour in 08.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get more into exactly what we did and how the different tours contrast to each other in a minute, but let's jump into our next guest here, Curtis, and we'll keep rolling. Here we go. We got another great buddy of mine, Corey Hatt. You're a lieutenant, correct, right now?
Yeah, that's correct. As of last year, so I've gone up every rank. Acting platoon warrant was the last rank I held before I commissioned. So just recently took over 32 MP platoon as the platoon commander last November.
And what tours were you on for Afghanistan? I can't remember.
So that was 306. We went in from the summer of 2006 in the fighting season to 07. I ripped out early for selection, and then 309 was the second tour. So first tour was with the Royals, 1RCR Charles Company, and then the second tour we attached with a group of guys from 3VP. Both in Kandahar region. So 306, most people know because of Op Medusa. That was one of the biggest operations Canadians have been involved in since the Korean War. And then a lesser known op would have been Baztuka. So we got the opportunity to work with the Crazy Eights. They're pretty popular from the exploits from that tour. So pretty heavy combat tour. And then 309 was really interesting as well. Got the opportunity to do a little bit of everything. So I think we mainly the Kandahar region was where we operated out of, but we went all the way down to Spin Buldak near the Pakistan border, over to Panjwai. And, I'm sure everyone from this podcast can relate to some of the craziness over there. and then up to Arghandab and Shawwalicott, kind of all over the place.
Yeah, man. And so you did those 306, 309, and now I can't remember, you're still in, right, as a reservist MP, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Trying to remember everybody's different jobs. Awesome. We'll get into more of you as well. Did we get Tim's audio sorted out there, Kurt?
He popped back in. Oh, there's him right there. There he is.
Perfect.
Shazam.
And his
mic's
still off. Oh no. Okay. Well, let me just see if I can pull this up real quick because your mic's still not working now.
Yeah.
I think it's showing on mute.
Yeah, it won't let me unmute him. It says, I guess they chose to mute themselves. Oh, so if you hit the mute button, it should let you unmute yourself now.
Or the mic in the bottom left corner.
No.
Okay.
Damn.
That's so good.
Okay. Well, let me, if I can remember his. I'd have to pull. Oh yeah. Okay. Okay. So I'd have to pull up his whole spiel, which was. It was quite long. When I had him on my podcast, I was going to, what have you done in the military? And he was like, sent me a book, basically, of all the places he's been and all the different things he's done. And I'm going to see if I can pull it up. If you'll give me the 1 second to do it.
Tim, it went away for a second. It looked like it was coming back.
I can see him talking.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, there we go.
Ah, man, still nothing, unfortunately.
Damn. Dang. Okay. Well, we'll have to give him a Cole's note, see if we can't get him sorted out for a little bit. But he was a sniper, a master sniper, and was in, I believe, Roto 106. He was at the Battle of the White School. And he has quite the history, and I was hoping to get him on there. But let's first off, thanks guys for having us, and I really appreciate you boys being on here with me because this is going to be awesome. First thing I wanted to talk about was threats. So we're going to go through Afghanistan in general and what the difference is and what the how we dealt with each one of those situations from our different perspectives. Because I know, Corey, did you go back as close protection at some point as well?
So I did do some private security work in the Caribbean. That was outside of the military. I was able to take a leave of absence. So I was for a year and a half working for a family down in Barbados.
Okay. Okay, so both your tours in Afghanistan were attached to the infantry, correct?
Yeah, so we did embed. Actually, the first tour was what was called the close support platoon. So we'd operate doing convoy force protection, QRF for all the attacks in the city. So whenever there's an ID strike or a tick, we'd help extract any downed vehicles, or if there's any casualties, I'd jump out and basically land the helicopters after we set up a cordon. And then for major operations, we get attached with the units. We basically get dispersed. So we're a platoon of MPs just kind of rolling around, mentoring Afghan police, checking up on substations, doing the local milk runs, the weekly milk runs to update the JCC and some of the fobs with fuel. So that was always fun. And just a little bit of everything. So we got to go everywhere, which was really cool.
That's wicked. So what was your biggest threat for 306? Was it IEDs or was it more small arms fire? Was it ambushes? Was it more?
We never had any concern for small arms fire. Like, we might have been shot a couple of times, maybe effectively, but it was always the IEDs. You never knew when that was going to happen. Specifically on the road, like if everyone that's been through Kandahar, Highway 1, there's always the same bombs in the same places. And then, there was some contractors that were hired to sweep the roads. And for those on 306, might remember CIA Jack. He was somebody that got blown up, but there was a lot of work done to try and clear the roads, and then we were paving the roads. Those IEDs were really effective. They just kept utilizing them, and it was really that unseen threat that you couldn't fight until we started getting those mine clearing, those big.
The E-Rock package.
Yeah, and then we got the ECM, so it was really helpful. But until then, we were rolling around in G-Wagons for the first 3 months, so a lot of soft armor out there. It wasn't very effective against AK, RPGs, or even really anything. So finally we got the RGs. That was a big game changer, but certainly it was always the IDs. We'd get, the odd tick, but it was never effective. They just spray and pray.
But are they mostly remote detonated, or were they command detonated? Did you ever get any of that kind of intel back after blast and stuff?
No, I just, for my level, I was a corporal, so basically just stuck up in the turret, and we'd be dismounted. I'd be following my master corporal around and just making sure he's safe. And then I think most of it started off as RC detonated, and then they started going command wire because of the jammers that we had. So they also started just pounding on more explosives to make the bombs bigger as we used more armor. So it was pretty much matching everything that we do. But I don't know how the statistics of what was what. I remember a few of those crazy sappers bipping some of the IEDs we came across. One guy blew it so hard a door flew over my head when I was in the G-Wagon. Whatever it was probably double what he should have used. And they gave us a warning, but of course I still watched. And those are some fond memories.
The Engineer Corps is known for its liberal use of explosives whenever we can. Yeah, we're really good at that. Okay, what was the best defense for it against? What did you find was the best defense against the IEDs? Because for us, IEDs was huge, but once we started dismounting the engineers all the time for everything, it started to work better. We were able to defeat a lot of them, or move past them, or at least find them before they set off.
We had a few tactics, and some of them were kind of unorthodox and depended on who you rolled with. So, for example, minor tac would basically just gas it from going at a 10-hour airfield. They'd go as fast as they could to their next location. So sometimes there'd be gaps of almost a kilometer between vehicles if you had an RG that was a little slower to change gears. But speed, aggression, definitely known common areas and choke points. So we just basically avoided it altogether. We'd go off-road sometimes, completely just change it up. So always changing your path and trying to distance yourselves. So generally, it seemed like the Taliban were focusing on bigger targets, bigger, longer convoys. They wouldn't waste the opportunity to maybe hit one vehicle and miss that chance if we flew by. So it was often bigger convoys. You knew it was coming when you saw them going through the village. Because the first tour, the majority of the tour were out of Camp Nathan Smith. So when you saw large convoys going through the city, you knew something was going to happen. Yeah. But smaller groups, we'd roll 3 vehicles, maybe 4. If it was a QRF, we'd have an engineer and a medic asset with us. So I guess smaller numbers really helped. And when you have an A&A truck in front of you, it seems to get blown up less. Or an A&P, they'd call in a favor to maybe a cousin or something. But
exactly. How about you, Mark? In 02, I imagine you were looking at small arms fire, right? IEDs weren't even really a thing at that point.
To be honest with you, the biggest threat in 02 was probably death by misadventure or injury by misadventure. And what I mean by that is the enemy threat was minimal. We didn't know that at the time, of course. Our first combat air assault into the Shicot during Op Anaconda was a bit of a fucking ass clencher, to put it bluntly. It was our first combat air assault, so everybody, apprehension was high, and the payoff was actually pretty low. So I found personally that the waiting for contact was always the worst. Once you made contact, it was like a big relief, right? Your cherry got popped and away you went and rock and roll and had some good times, but leading up to that was always the apprehension of when were you going to get hit and from what direction and by who. And and in the first tour, it turned out that the enemy, all the Al Qaeda, were on the run after Op Anaconda. There was virtually there was a vacuum left behind when the Taliban ran away, or sorry, when the Al Qaeda ran away to Pakistan, and the Taliban were sort of left in a power vacuum without the Al Qaeda. They were kind of they were set back on their heels. The Taliban weren't sure what to do, and of course, the civil war was going poorly for them with the Northern Alliance coming down through the country. So Al Qaeda was on the run, and Taliban weren't really sure what they were going to do. So the enemy threat was actually very low on the first tour, and the biggest risk, quite honestly, was friendly fire. We lost four guys to friendly fire on April 17th in 2002 with an errant, well, not an errant, very deliberate JDAMs from an F-16, which targeted A Company, our parachute company, training down at Tarnak Farms, which was, of course, right next to the illuminated Super Bowl of Kandahar Airfield. So how somebody could mistake troops training on a live fire range for enemy combatants right adjacent to the biggest base in southern Afghanistan is perplexing to me, but that's neither here nor there. They got bombed, and nationalities had nothing to do with it. Because I'll tell you this, the Rakkasans were brilliant. When we lost those first four guys, they were the first casualties that we had taken, and the Rakkasans grieved right along with us. So it was the national aspect had nothing to do with it. It just was death by misadventure, and it was very unfortunate. But that marred an otherwise brilliant tour, full of high adventure for us Canadians, doing things that the Canadian Army had never done. I mean, we did the first battalion level combat air assault in Canadian Army history into the Shaikat, and then repeated the adventure into Tora Bora, sussing out Bin Laden's CNN caves, which weren't there, but we did find a battalion level fighting position, which was brilliantly executed, and we destroyed it to deny it for future use. But interesting times. So the threat in 08, in 08, it was a completely different kettle of fish. I was responsible for, my Kandak was responsible for security in Panjwai district. So my patch was all of Panjwai, starting at Bazari, Panjwai, and Mazumgar down through Spur. And then all of at that time, the strategy with the static combat outposts all along Route Fosters in an attempt to control Route Fosters, which became Route Hyena, trying to keep that route open, which was an impossibility. I mean, it was twisty and turny unless you had boots on the ground on every stretch, every centimeter of that road, every inch of that road, 24/7. You couldn't control it. They would just lay IEDs right in behind you as you progressed, as we found out. So the threat in 08 was definitely IEDs. That was number one. Number two was kinetic, was small arms fire. I mean, we were involved in, unlike some earlier tours, we were involved in a lot of very direct firefights. And in fact, the day I got blown up and lost my legs, that was the prelude to a complex three-way ambush that we were caught in. So the enemy had improved from 06 to 08 in terms of his own tactics, techniques, and procedures. I mean, he wasn't stupid. He knew how we operated, and he used that to his advantage the day I got hit. For instance, he targeted a headquarters element that they knew would be in the center of an all-round defense in a large open area. So they weren't dumb in the way they sighted themselves. And in fact, they sighted themselves deliberately to thwart my rescue mission the day I was hit. So, the enemy was smart. They were, they may not be educated, but they were very, very wily. And,
I mean, they've been fighting wars for like the last, 70 years?
Well, hundreds of years, to be honest. But,
it's the British back in the 1800s. I mean, there was a small gap in the beginning of the 19th century.
They were, but I mean, they'd been stomped on by the Great and everybody's. The Afghans were the crossroads of Southwest Asia. So, they took quite a beating over the centuries. But be that as it may, they were good fighters. They were canny fighters. They weren't invulnerable. They certainly weren't supermen, and neither were the the coalition-sided Afghans, the good guys, as it were. They weren't these legendary mountain men of lore. They were just a bunch of scared recruits for the most part. And getting them to fight was sometimes difficult because unlike us, who showed up full of piss and vinegar for 6 months of scrapping, those guys didn't go home at the end of the 6 months tour. They were there for the long haul, and some of them didn't, prefer not to fight if they could avoid it. Which I really can't say as I blame them, being conscripts and all the rest of it.
When you can't leave the war zone,
when it's your country and you're stuck in a war zone in a serving army, it's if you don't want to be there, it's not a hat.
So for you on the omelet and your movements. Oh, is he breaking up?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry. The way we moved, because I was on QRF most of the time, and when we weren't, when I wasn't, I was attached to the infantry companies. We were rolling around doing pick a fight patrols. What was your biggest defense, like for working with the omelet, because you're surrounded by ANA?
Yeah, well, we had our biggest defense rolling were certainly the RGs, the mine-resistant armored vehicles. They were our first line of defense, and they had ECM on board, so there was some electronic jamming capability there. Although the enemy just reverted to using hardwired command detonated IEDs, so it's always a race, right? You get an armored vehicle, they build a bigger bomb, and that two-way arms race never ends. It's like the anti-armor race, armor versus anti-armor. And so it was the first line defense was definitely the RG when we were rolling. When you're on your feet, your best defense was your tactical field craft, just doing all those things they taught you right from basic training on up. Keeping your head down, not silhouetting yourself, and so on and so forth. So I'd say that was our biggest defense in 08. That and working with the Afghans, there was local knowledge, a lot of local knowledge, and the ability to, I would suggest, the Afghans had the ability at times to communicate through back channels with the Taliban to sort of not negotiate, but sometimes broker local sort of peace agreements versus scrapping and so on and so forth. So there was a weird element that I couldn't quite put my finger on, where there was a sensation that a lot of things had been planned between the Taliban and the Afghan National Army so that they would miss each other in the field.
What? No.
Yeah. Funny how that could occur. But
So what about the what do you think our biggest weaknesses were? Because the one thing I've realized that, like, when we were rolling,
no question, our adherence to roots. In 08, it was our fixation on roots, and specifically root fosters. That I know that NATO command had ordered that roots be secured as a first order of business. That was a NATO priority countrywide. But what I think people failed to take into account was when you started talking about Kandahar specifically, and probably adjacent to us as well. But at the end of the day, in southern Afghanistan, securing roots was a whole lot different than securing roots up in Mazar-e-Sharif or something like that up in the north, where things were relatively calm and quiet. You just simply, like I said earlier, could not secure a route unless you physically stood on it in Afghanistan, and then you could only secure it as far as you could see and as far as your weapons could reach. So I think our biggest weakness definitely was our slavery to roots. We didn't have the aviation solution back then. Canada didn't have helicopters in theater in 08, and that was a huge game changer when they came later on for subsequent tours, because then they were able to use vertical envelopment against an enemy that was really defending against road-bound ground incursion into their territory. So once we got helicopters, it was a whole different kettle of fish. But in 08, we didn't have helicopters, so we were road-bound and ground-bound.
Yeah.
And often we found that it was better to drive to a location, stop short of an objective, and then move into it walking. Yeah, absolutely. Trying to get into Mushan, for instance, which was the furthest combat outpost to the west in the Horn of Panjwai. Just once a month, trying to get in there to rotate the Afghan company that was operating under the most austere conditions with one of my 4-man teams to resupply and rotate that combat outpost was a 13-hour day on a one-way trip down the Arghandab River with a route clearance package doing 10 kilometers an hour. And then trying to breach in when we got there, it didn't matter which direction we breached into that combat outpost from, we got hit by IEDs.
Multiple times.
Every single time. I went to Mushan 3 times in the 3.5 months I was there before I got blown up. And every time the Armor Corps took a hit. We lost Trooper Akazi there. I think I was Akazi. Yeah, we lost him on my second trip into Mushan. And Mark Fuchko, the hit that trapped him inside his Leopard 2 driver's hull position for 45 minutes while his blown up legs were bleeding out. He was on the third one, I think.
Were you around for the Buffalo when that one got toasted? Because that was that was the 2 weeks we spent trying to clear Foster's from I was on that operation. I was on the south side of the road, if I remember correctly. We were supposed to be in that position. My ELAB was supposed to be in that position. It was about 3 days beforehand. We hit a smaller IED, which blew off a couple tires and didn't really do much to us. It kind of screwed up my back, but we carried on and got cross-loaded into the Buffalo and into the other ELAB, the rear package.
Right.
And so it was when we came back up on the road right outside of Mushan, we had the tank roll that whole thing for
kilometers.
I can't remember. Yeah, kilometers. And then he tried to get up on the road and he had to do it 3 or 4 times to get over the verge. And he went up, and then as soon as that Buffalo came up, it freaking toasted that Buffalo. So I remember trying to get it. Anything west, basically, of Spurwingar was just that was cowboy country at that point.
Yeah, that was I wouldn't say no-go area because we went, but it was definitely as you say, cowboy country. You had to gun up to step foot in that sort of area, and we had guys scattered out there. But the problem was this would lead to our second vulnerability, was we tried to tie ourselves to ground, and that was a huge mistake with the number of troops that we had, because we were busy playing whack-a-mole as it was, right? I mean, I remember trying to free Afghans up to do offensive operations, maneuver-based operations, and trying to get these Afghans freed up out of these static, OP positions and combat outposts was extremely difficult. Trying to force generate troops to actually go and prosecute raids and ambushes and cordon searches and things like that. We did it, and we managed to do it. The Afghans were resistant to night operations, but we got them to do night operations. All you had to do is call their bluff. Yeah. I mean, they're masters of one-upmanship and the art of the deal, right? And so the Afghans will say, well, we can't do night operations unless you give us night vision equipment and phone cards. Always phone cards. And and they turn around and say, well, look, buddy, I've been in the Army, the Canadian Army, for 20 friggin' years as a professional soldier. And for the first 15 of those, we didn't have night vision and we did night operations. So, and you got the moon here at 90% illumination. You can read a friggin' newspaper in the middle of the night and see 300 yards. So I don't think this is going to be a problem. And they would back down and go, yeah, you're right. You got us. So off we go and do night ambushes.
So okay. Thanks, Mark. That's awesome. I'm going to introduce Tim now that we got his audio thing sorted, and then we'll carry on with the question.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Tim. That is fantastic.
Awesome.
Can you give us a brief rundown of your history? Because you were 106, correct?
That's correct.
Afghanistan, and then were you there beforehand as well?
No, we got screwed out of that. The reserves took our job because of the. It wasn't the reserves. Our battalion commander. We were QRF, so we were supposed to deploy on the original 3 VP deployment after 9/11. but our battalion was scheduled to go to Bosnia. So the town crier, King, decides, well, I want to take my whole unit overseas. So he sent a company from 2VP to go over instead of us. So then we're like, fuck, but okay, at least we got Bosnia. Then Bosnia came, they went, nope, we're going to bring a whole company of reservists over, and we're axing your company. So we lost 2 missions in 3 months. Morale was low, so I didn't go until 06, which was the first combat tour.
Yeah.
So I know we're short on time, so I just want to go straight into that. So you can appreciate the logistical issue was the mission was Kabul with 1 rifle company and all the ats and deaths to support that. So when we opened up our operation to a battle group and an entire battalion, when the kit came down from Kabul, there was only enough for 1 rifle company. We got 3 fucking rifle companies. So our company had nothing. Literally, I was a CQ a mess. And I was going to every CQ of the Americans to get batteries. We didn't even have batteries. We didn't even have ammo. So I managed to get 25,000 rounds of 5.6 from the Americans. But then after I acquired that, I find out we're not legally allowed to use it. So two of my corporals from the Patricias were working with the State Department of Kabul for doing close protection up there. And they gave me an email the same day, actually, went, hey, we're short ammo. Do you have any? I went, matter of fact, I got 25,000 rounds. Get down here and I'll give it to you. So they flew down on a Herc and I gave them 25,000 rounds, got a couple of Oakleys and a patrol pack, and that was it. So at least I didn't have to pick that stuff. So the challenges were real at the beginning of that mission. And with my company, with C Company, as you can appreciate, we're the maneuver company. And we ended up projecting up to 250 kilometers away from Kandahar. So you can appreciate the logistical issue of resupplying fuel.
Yeah.
Water rations was all helicopter, right? And poor 8 Company was stuck in a forward operating base somewhere getting IED'd all the time. And then they finally got out on the push around July. They ended up maneuvering. So, yeah, it was definitely challenging.
Man. So what was your biggest threat, do you think? Was it just straight all-arms fire, or was IEDs up there?
So for us, that's a great question, because at the beginning of the war, the Taliban had not really engaged with us since 03, or what was it, 02, when Patricias went. So they've been dealing with the Americans and the coalition, and their thought process was they get hit and they just fight their way out, whereas we did what we were trained to do. We would turn and burn and go in and take them out. Mm-hmm. So after we fucking killed a shitload of these guys, then they decided I think a bit too late, but good for us. They started to IED us about 2.5 months into the tour. We're getting hit because after they started engaging with the small arms, they then went, shit, we can't keep doing this because they're dying, right? Yeah. And I'll give you a quick example. I wasn't on the mission, but when we took over Spin Buldak in August, that was the only time we went into a FOB, and that was only for about 4 weeks on the Pakistani border. There was 2 American call signs, 2 American Humvee call signs there. All infantry. They did 2 tours in Iraq. This is their first time in Afghanistan, and they're just holding up logistically in this FOB. So company commander is taking the boys up north of the Spin, about 20 k's out, going, hey, what's up here? And they asked the French Special Forces who we took over from. And they're like, oh, waffle, waffle, waffle. So they never went up there. They're running unarmored vehicles, no casualties.
Yeah. So
we asked these Americans, hey, you guys want to join us? So they did. And again, I wasn't on the mission. This is from the debrief. So the boys roll in there. The Afghans had never seen these guys before. They open up on them. And the boys killed like 45 of these guys. There was 1 mobility kill on us. It was Corporal Reed's vehicle, and Corporal Reed unfortunately died at the White School.
Yep.
But at the end of that, apparently the Americans were like, holy shit, that was fucking crazy. That was the most insane thing we've ever done. And O.C. Fletcher, who's now the brigade commander, looks back at them and goes, that was the lamest firefight ever. And these guys had 2 tours in Iraq. So that just shows you that was the smallest firefight my company had. And that was the worst those infantry guys had ever experienced.
Well, this is why I wanted to have guys from different tours on different timelines doing different jobs, because like the insight that we can get from the differences is going to be fantastic. So what if small arms was the biggest threat for your guys during the tour? What was the best defense you guys had? Was it the maneuvering? Was it
Maneuvering.
being in armor? That was it?
Fucking maneuvering, man. We maneuvered and maneuvered and maneuvered. We never stayed in a spot at all. And what Mark said, I mean, the challenges with the Afghan National Army, as you can appreciate, is really hard because you get a different group attached to you for every particular mission. And we're going in on this mission, taking out 3 villages in one day. We got this new crew RV'd with us in the middle of the desert because we would try and leaguer away from Panjwai when we could. That way we can get some rest and good arcs of fire. So this crew rolls up, and as soon as they roll up, we just get a shit feeling like this is a bad crew. These guys are sketchy as fuck. So we convey what we need to achieve for the next day. Off we go, and of course it ended up being a 6-hour firefight, and we had 8 platoon in contact there, and then we let them develop their contact. They didn't need support. After we did our leaders recce, I was the acting sergeant major on this. OC Fletcher's like, okay, yeah, we'll let them handle it. And we started maneuvering to another location close by, and then we get hit. And that was then our firefight with the company. And we did a company right flanking in Afghanistan. I don't think that's been done in fucking years since Korea. A right flanking.
Yeah.
And what was happening was, since 8 platoon was in contact, I had 9 platoon for my fire base, and 7 platoon was going to be left on the right flanking, and the Afghan National Army sketchy platoon was going to be right on the right flanking. So I had to run through machine gun fire because I was with the fire base. Machine gun fire because the OC's like, hey, Sergeant Major, these guys aren't with us. You know, link up. So I ran through machine gun fire, linked up with these guys with the Terp, go, hey, this is what's going to achieve. You're going up this trail, you're going to link up, good to go. They're like, yeah, we're good. I go running back through machine gun fire, get back to 9 platoon fire base. And then the battle captain, who's back at the Argadab River, 3 kilometers back, is then saying, he's then saying, hey, I got call signs running towards me. So these Afghans literally ran 3 kilometers out of battle. Like, that's pretty awesome. But that fucked us over huge, because then the OC's like, hey, where's my guys? I go, I fucking sent them there. Then battle captain's like, hey, I got call signs. That's the guys. So we got bogged down. So unfortunately, one of our guys, he got a career-ending injury. He got 762 through the femur. So his career was over, and he's not walking right still to this day. But then we pulled off that position. We extracted that platoon that was stuck out on the right flank, pounded these guys in, and then we did 155 howitzers in to all the blocking positions around so they couldn't escape, to all the T-junctions. It was fucking well done by the OC Fletcher, who got the the Medal of Valor, Star of Valor. Great guy. And so we got everyone backed off, and we dropped a 500-pounder right down range on these guys. And we've been at it for 6 hours at this point. So that was super danger close. It was me, the Foo-Fac, the OC, and the OC's signaler, Rooney. And so the only thing going through my mind was 3VP getting waxed on their first go. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to suck. Boom, shockwaves go, good to go. We do our BDA following this. And yeah, we found 45 guys dead. We captured 3. 3 guys were still alive. They were so high on drugs. We found hypodermic needles. These guys were on heroin, man. I don't know how they survived a 500-pound blast, but they did. Put the hearing protection on, blindfolded. I put them in air conditioning, put water downrange on these guys. I am looking after them. I don't want to repeat the airborne regiment, right? And so we did our tactical questioning. Von Ingram did tactical questioning. And we ended up sending 2 of them back through helicopter because they're HBT. And then the other one went through to the ANA, as we know what happens there. And that, do we have a quick 3 minutes to go through that, what happened on that one? So the next village we took, we ended up capturing 6 guys. All of them turned them over to the ANA. As we stepped off to go to the next village, all executed. And the media were around. So guess what? Get back home to Canada. 5 months later, added MPs. Yeah, we want to talk about this incident. I'm like, I fucking told everybody. As soon as we change this policy to give low values to the ANA, this is going to happen. So nothing came of it. But that was the challenge.
Well, I think Chance is having a couple audio issues on his end, so I'll fill in on the meantime while he works on it. First off, it's an honor to have all three of you on here. We've been talking for months about trying to get more Canadians on the podcast, and Chance is the first one that we're actually able to get on. So it's really cool to get some more points of view. So thanks for coming on and joining us. As you guys know, we were there well after you guys were. The Americans that replaced the Canadians at Massengar and Sperwengar and all the Cobbs and Fops, we replaced them. So Americans have been on the ground for a little bit. So we never actually had the opportunity to work with or interact with any of the Canadian forces in the area. All we would ever get was like the legacy. So
right.
The maple leaf at Massengar, or the interpreter saying, "Oh, the Canadians did this and the Canadians did that." But I mean, other than that, and a few documentaries, like we've not had the opportunity to kind of get that firsthand viewpoint. So this is really cool for us.
Roger.
So I mean, what was the latest any of you guys were in Panjwai? Was 2010 for Chance the latest one?
I would think so. Yeah, for me, it was 08 when I got my one-way ticket out of theater on a stretcher. That was it for me. I never went back. So I think Canadians, we ceased combat operations in 2011, but we started standing her down a little bit before that. I kind of tried to track it from home back in Canada, but it was difficult to tell who was who in the zoo and who was doing what. The first indication, I guess, I had that you guys were firmly in charge was unfortunately a chunk of bad news that made the international media when a sergeant, I don't even know what unit he was from, went on a bit of a mass murder spree there in Panjwai. And that happened not too long after Canada ceased combat operations, because I remember thinking, damn, there goes all our good work with the locals kind of thing. But that was sort of the first indicator I had that you guys were in charge in Panjwai.
Yeah, and I think it was about 8 or 9 months after there were Americans owning battle space. And we actually, if you get a chance, the first 3 episodes of this season talk about that incident and what happened. So if you're kind of curious,
right on. Yeah,
the background on that, it's not quite all that the media said it to be, and there's definitely a lot of unanswered questions about that one. But I mean, that dude walked off the base and ruined whatever was left of the goodwill that we had with the Pashto population. I mean,
and I had a feeling that was going to happen. And he basically sabotaged all of your good efforts in the area, and that's a tough road to hoe. I mean, how do you undo that? The damage done.
I mean, we got there a couple weeks after. I mean, we literally were on the plane to Afghanistan a week after that happened. And we were a little bit west, so we were at Sperwan, and he did that right just outside of Zangabad. So right. It wasn't our company's AO, but I mean, the ripple effects were obvious. Everyone was angry, and it was a particularly vicious fighting season. At a time it had been kind of dialing down. So, they definitely were not happy about that situation. And then over by Zangabad, it was even worse. They were definitely very angry over there.
Did you see a huge upswing in kinetic operations as a result of that, like bad guy stuff?
Well, I mean, since I wasn't there before, I wouldn't know exactly what to compare it to. Right. When we got on the ground, it had been fairly quiet in our neck of the woods, and then it took a couple months for it to ramp up, but it was a pretty violent summer. The battalion that was there, I think, had 9 KIAs. So it was, again, I wasn't there for the earlier ones, so I don't know if it was a particularly violent uptick, but it felt pretty violent.
That's what amazed me in 08 was the start of the fighting season. You heard all the stories from previous tours about, you just wait till the poppy harvest, just wait till the poppy harvest. And, it was true. We had a few small ticks in leading up to it, but really it was about mid-May when the poppy harvest was complete and all the young men were suddenly unemployed that fucking game on, and it was like somebody flipped a switch, and suddenly the bad guys got all agitated. And yeah,
that was an experience as well. It was fairly quiet. We got into a couple of good gunfights in early May and late April, but when June came around, not only was it the firefights, that's when they really started dropping the IEDs in the ground. And I hadn't
Yeah.
really made the connection before you just said that they probably started turning those fuckers on once this harvest was over. Just so they weren't catching civilians going from field to field. They probably turned those things on once the harvest was over, and that's when it really picked up for us.
Yeah, same. So same tactics. Well, same patch, right? Same ground. We all walked the same ground, same dust.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
It's
So
always
I think,
suspicious. The police would leave at the same time as the Taliban. They just disappear around poppy
Yeah.
season and then come back.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
wonder what was really going on.
you don't see anything.
Yeah.
I love it. I think we also have to we look at history, and Mark, I mean, being an officer, I mean, you research history all the time, like us NCOs. But I think we have to get away from thinking about what we did on my tour. We did all this, and then the next tour lost the ground, and then that tour gained ground, and the next tour lose ground. I think we have to get away from that. We have to remember any war that you go, at the end of the day, what is the end objective? It's about your crew and what you achieved. And you know what? If your ground is lost at the end of the day, so be it. I mean, we look at Vietnam. That happened all the time. We look at Croatia, Bosnia, World War II, the same thing. So I think we have to get away from being negative about, yeah, was it worth it? Of course it was worth it. Everything we did was worth it. It improved the bubble of those people at that time. So it gained more time for those people.
I have no question in my mind, and I harbor no regrets, notwithstanding the loss of my legs, that we did good work. We went on an altruistic mission. I think our mission, our intent was virtuous. There was nothing in it for us specifically, other than a bunch of combat experience, and we were there to do good works, just like we always try to do when we're overseas. Always leave the place better than you found it, right? It's no different than a rifle range.
But it wasn't just combat experience. It was, we improved the living bubble of that time. Because like every sure we did, what was the very first thing we asked? Are the girls going to school? So we ensured people got educated. That is important. So, I mean, you look at how many years were we there? 12 years? That 12-year time gap gave people a fucking chance. 12 years is huge. Could you imagine an 8-year-old girl, 12 years, she's 20. So from 8 to 20, she actually developed to be a good person. And so we made a lot of good people there. So it was very, I think, effective.
Yeah, it takes a generation to change. It takes a long time. So you're putting in those seeds of what you're going to change for tomorrow. And hopefully we see that change. It's obviously a concern now with the Taliban starting to move back in and take territory. We're probably all thinking of those interpreters and friends that we made over there, hoping they're all right.
I've been working personally on getting General Habibi, who was a little higher than most of our pay grade, but he was the Afghan brigade commander responsible for Kandahar, for the province of Kandahar, and specifically Panjwai. So General Habibi, who was the only Afghan who ever reached out to me after I was blown up and lost my legs to say thank you for your sacrifice on behalf of the Afghan people. So he and I have maintained a bit of a pen pal relationship, and he's trying to emigrate to Canada for obvious reasons, because he's retired now. He gave us 12 years or 11 years of solid Afghan allied support. And he's a good guy. He's one of the good guys. We brought him over and sent him to the Canadian Defense College. He's got the Canadian Medal of Military Merit, and so on and so forth. So yeah, he's one of the good guys. And we can't get him to Canada. I can't get him to Canada.
And that's a huge point.
Oh, it's brutal. It's unconscionable that we relied on this guy for 11 years. He's our number one ally. His secretary was just shot up 2 days ago because they're after him. They're getting close. They're closing in on this guy. And former major general in the Afghan army, and he's just a victim waiting to happen because we can't get him to emigrate into Canada. And he's one of the good guys. He's one of the good refugees. And it just boggles my mind, man.
Well, when I was my last job there, working in the Alberta government, I went to the Minister of Immigration there, and I was trying to get my terp brought over, and it was just impossible.
Yeah.
So
my one terp did get out. Froggy got out. He's in Ottawa.
Yeah, my terp, he got out on his own accord. Well done. He got to Italy, and he's now got a master's degree in Italy, and he's living there. So, there's some success there. But yeah, when I tried with the immigration minister in Alberta at the time, we could not do a bloody thing. It was terrible.
Yeah. Oh, it's like beating your head against a brick wall. I mean, I've written letters to Harjit Sajan, who's more worried about his job than he is about doing good works for people. That's our Minister of National Defense, by the way. So same as the Secretary of Defense in the States. So he's fairly, high horsepower, and all it would take is him to lean across the floor to the Minister of Immigration for the Canadian government and say, "Hey, by the way, we got this guy. We need to get him out." But do you think I can get that out of the guy? Not a chance. It's just painful. It's friggin' painful. So anyhow, there is a legacy that we've left behind, and unfortunately, it's a bit of an embarrassing legacy, and it's a definite human interest case with these abandoned interpreters. I know the U.S., to its credit, is making a concerted effort right now to get those who assisted the U.S. war effort in Afghanistan out in terms of the local nationals. Kudos to you guys. Canada did the same thing when we pulled out. We had a short program that ran for about a year where they could fast track immigration, but that was it. That was all we offered, and we've offered nothing since. And I think that's it's a huge mistake on the government of Canada's part, because as much as there may be a desire in the part of the Canadian government to turn the page on Afghanistan and put it in the rearview mirror, the fact of the matter is we've still got a living legacy over there, and it's a tough road to hoe. But these people were relying on us, and now in their hour of need, we've the check arrived and we left the table.
Yeah, I mean the United States, they don't think they deserve that much credit. We've been hounding our government for years to bring these interpreters home. It's not like we decided yesterday that at some point we're going to end the war in Afghanistan. We've known for at least 9 months that we were going to be out. We're supposed to be out in May, but now we're going to be out in September. And now 2 months before we're supposed to be out, now like, oh shit, we have a problem. It's like, no, this is a problem for years. Like the fact that you had to go through the ridiculous process that they put in place to get out as an interpreter was bullshit to begin with. Hey, if you did a full term with coalition forces, great. Here's your visa. It's not like the Taliban is ISIS or the Iraqi army. They're not going to come to the United States and try to plan terror attacks. If one or
these
two
are the good guys.
Well, I mean, even if we accidentally bring in 100 Taliban with these reporters, the Taliban don't give a shit about America. Like they're it's all tribalistic. It's all political in Afghanistan. They're not going to launch terror attacks. So they've got this idea like, we don't want to bring the wrong people, and fuck it, who cares? Bring them all. We'll deal with it when they get here. I'd rather have 17,900 interpreters that are good and deal with 100 shitbags than watch 18,000 people die and get slaughtered by the Taliban.
Absolutely.
Here's the thing. So we always plan future operations, right? So as soon as we get into Afghanistan, what are we planning? As soon as you arrive, we start planning the lead plan. We start planning the exit plan for that roto. As soon as we started working with our terps, everybody went, hey, you know what? We should bring these guys home with us. So why the fuck did we not start this administrative process of going, right, maybe let's put a mission cap on these guys. These guys do a full tour with this crew, and then they do, a quarter of a tour and do, train, do right seat rides, left seat rides with the next terps. And then guess what? They get to come home with us and then integrate. So why didn't we think this way? What do you think, Mark?
I have no idea. I can only attribute it to short-sightedness on the part of the Canadian government. The Canadian government was active in Afghanistan, but their focus was Kabul, not Kandahar. And other than some CSIS dudes running around, our version of the CIA, there wasn't a whole lot of Canadian government presence outside of the oh Jesus, I'm having a brain fart. The PRT, the Provincial Reconstruction Team. and the diplomats there. But other than that, some field workers. The real Canadian government was in Kabul, and I think the war was pretty. It didn't exist to them. They had their own little problems dealing with the Afghan ministries in Canada and in Kabul, and trying to get them up and running. And I think the Canadian government, there was a disconnect in terms of the government's monitoring and sense of the war and what the needs of those of us fighting were, as opposed to the sense they got of the big picture from their little microcosm in Kabul. You know what I mean? Like, the decision makers rarely came down to Kandahar to see the war. The decision makers were all stuck in Kabul dealing with Karzai and his crew. So I think as far as why didn't we plan for the Terps? I think it was just a lack of farsightedness. It was benign neglect.
Well, I mean, with the Western countries, we do have this, I don't want to say arrogance, but it really is arrogance. Like, well, we know what's right. We'll deal with it when the time comes. And so it was always the next guy's problem, right? So, when it was 2003, Bush is like, hey, this is going beyond my term. It'll be the next guy's problem. Obama, this is the next guy's problem. And not even presidents, but just administrations and generals, joint chairman of the Joint Chiefs, all this, it always changes. I mean, there's a new leader of Afghanistan forces every 6 months. And I think people just felt like it wasn't their problem. They weren't going to deal with it. And now suddenly it's somebody's problem.
The forever war, right? I mean, we won't have to deal with it until we get to the end, and we're never going to get to the end. So why worry about it?
Yeah, I think we have to give Afghanistan more credit than we give it, though, because we see it from the battlefield perspective. We're not seeing it from the everyday Afghan. And good friend of mine, he was a sergeant in Pat platoon, David Lavery, and a JTF fellow who's now working full time in Afghanistan forever. And he sees it, and I see his posts. These guys have their own UFC events. They have their own, America's Singer, whatever that's called.
Yeah.
Afghanistan
stuff. So there is enough security there where they're able to televise soap operas and these reality shows and their version of UFC. So they have a lot more going on than we give it credit for. That's for sure.
I mean, I would say a lot of that stuff is probably pretty centralized to the Kabul area, if I were to make it.
Absolutely. And the north, Mazar-e Sharif and that area there, where it's relatively benign and always was.
Yeah.
But I think you got to, there's kind of a dividing line in Afghanistan, right? I mean, as you mentioned earlier, one of our hosts mentioned earlier, it's all tribal. At the end of the day, if you want to know what the Afghans are all about, it's all about tribal politics. And God forbid we should ever get visibility on the machinations going on there. But I think when you talk about the country of Afghanistan, you're ultimately talking probably about a partitioned state, something akin to the island of Cyprus, with a rump state in the south in Kandahar belonging to the Pashtun, and the Daris and the rest taking the other 2/3 of the country to the north. Because I don't think they're ever going to see eye to eye. I don't think there's necessarily going to be a lasting negotiated political settlement. Really, we're talking about a civil war here that we injected ourselves into the middle of. Had we just done the Al-Qaeda piece and said, okay, mission accomplished, over to you, Afghans, to sort yourselves out, I think it would have been a one and done. But as it was, we slipped the slippery slope into nation building. And once we did that, we took on a generational responsibility that, quite frankly, I believe Canada failed to pay the bill on. We lost our political will there within a short span of a decade, and relatively short span of a decade, and pulled out.
Well, both Sgt Major and Mark made really good points, because I was back in 2017, and there were a lot of things about the Afghans that really impressed me. Because in 2012, I was not impressed. They weren't fighting for the country. They didn't give a shit. It was really hard to get the ANA to participate in operations. The police were high all the time, and they were corrupt. Like, I didn't walk away with a great feeling in 2012. when I went back in 2015, I'm watching these dudes like the Coast Provincial Force, hitting buildings like Army Rangers. I'm watching their pilots flying AH-6s and Mi-17s and doing their own air assault missions. I'm seeing them running their own artillery.
Fantastic.
Like really, really cool stuff. And it gave me this piece of hope that maybe they can hold out. Maybe they won't contain the tribal areas. They shouldn't have any dream of containing the tribal areas.
Yeah.
But if they can control the population centers, they might make it. And unfortunately,
the other thing that a lot of people fail to understand is that we saw Afghanistan at its absolute worst. We saw the seamy underbelly. If you consider Afghanistan is a city, we saw the seamy underbelly of the city. We saw the worst crime area of the city. Kandahar province is the problem area of Afghanistan. So we saw Afghanistan at its absolute worst, but 90% of the country is not like that. Never has been. And so we our perceptions are colored by our experiences directly, and we all experienced the bad side of Afghanistan, but there's a 90% of it that's a good side. And you got to remember that.
Yeah, I mean, Afghanistan was super modernized. They had like museums surrounding their shrines. Like you could go and see the castle that what's Alexander the Great built and stuff like that. And they like tourist attractions. And then, but man, it's the thing is like you get there are two places. One is definitely Kandahar, Helmand, and the other one is the Kunar. I mean, you get 30 minutes outside of J-Bad, and it's a completely different world.
It's almost like going back to the Stone Ages. You have modern day, completely modern condos. Go half an hour in the countryside. You're basically back into the Stone Age. People living out of caves. And you brought up the point previously how it's become tribal. It always was like that after World War II, just because Britain and some of the victors carved up some lines, didn't stop the tribal Pashtuns from growing across the border, nor did it stop the northern Persian Empire, like the Iran. Like there was back in the day, Iran was matching every US dollar 4-1. So there's always been that assistance. And one could almost, the way you see things going now, you could almost approach it from an economics perspective where maybe there is something else going there. What is it that's so strategic about Afghanistan? It's not only the location, world's biggest copper deposit is there. You see China with their Belt and Road Initiative. Economics is really that's going to be the warfare that we're already seeing in the future. But when they secured that Minac mine contract, like their Belts and Road Initiative is really, it's kind of frustrating to see what's happening with all these headways that China's making, given the roads that we've put in with the Afghan populace, spending all that time defending that nation, allowing them to become prosperous, laying out that secure background. Yeah. Really, the long-term effect is where are things going next and where are we going to be? Because I can guarantee you there's going to be another conflict, and it'll likely be that jumping point where we'll go next. So that those roads have been laid, I think.
I agree. And that Chinese point, I was in Africa, in Sierra Leone in 2010, and that mission was kind of like a bar joke. We had 3 Americans, 9 Canadians, 35 Brits walk into a bar. And that was it. So the Chinese were building all the roads. So the Chinese provided uniforms to these guys. The Americans provided the boats to the guys. And the Brits provided training. And we were part of the training mission. So China's really embedded in there. Well, I just kind of want to go back to what Curtis was saying. I just want to ask your opinion on what you said on the 2011 tour, that tour where they didn't give a fuck. Do you think that could have been a lot of just combat fatigue at that point? They're just tired and they just need to be rejuvenated?
No, I think the primary contributing factor to that is that they were Uzbeks. They were not Pashto. So it was sometime in the years prior to we got there, they decided that they were not going to regionally align the troops. They were going to rotate them around like we do in the States. So everyone we worked to was out of the north. And as you guys are painfully familiar, Uzbeks don't give a fuck about Pashtos, and Pashtos don't give a fuck about the Uzbeks. So to convince this 19-year-old Uzbek soldier to carry a mine detector and go clear IEDs off a road for the Pashto, he didn't give a shit. There were some of them that were good professional soldiers, and they were far and few between. But that was my takeaway. They didn't care because it wasn't their country in their minds.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah,
good point.
How's my audio? Can you guys hear me?
It's really quiet, but we can hear you.
You're low.
I'm low. Okay. Well, I'll just get really close and I'll yell into the mic for a bit. I can't.
You're sounding like Joe Biden.
Oh dear God. Oh dear. Okay. Let me see if I can't boost this a little bit. Anyway.
There you go.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I think it's this thing. How does that sound?
Better.
It's not that microphone that's picking up the noise. That's the problem.
It's your weak voice.
It's my weak. I got general weakness. I like it. Yeah. So the point I was going to make was that as you guys are saying it, with the tribalism and the all of the issues there, where do you think we failed in terms of garnering tribal support? Because we all know that it was tribal. The government knows that it was tribal, and yet we still went in there and said, you know what, democracy is fantastic, and they saw why it wasn't. But where do you think we on the ground lost?
Well, we didn't understand the tribal dynamic. I mean, everybody knows when you go in there that the Pashtuns don't get along with the Dari, and the Dari have always been the dominant intellectual dilettantes trying to rule over the Pashtun nation. So we all understood the basics. We all read The Bear Went Over the Mountain and The Other Side of the Mountain. All that good stuff. We understood the basics. But when you started talking about power brokerage in Kandahar, you're talking about a friggin' miasma of criminal enterprise intertwined with tribal politics, confused by the NATO military presence and the lucrative contracts that it offers and control of those contracts. And it was just a mess of organized crime. You got the president of the country's friggin' brother directly involved in Afghanistan or in Kandahar as a power broker on the shady side of things. You've got the opium, that whole side of things going on. I mean, it's just nobody understood the dynamic. It's beyond tribal. It's international criminal enterprises involved in southern Afghanistan in a big way with the poppy and the opium situation. It's a mess. The economy in the south is reliant upon production of illicit narcotics, and it's tough to convince a farmer, for instance, that he should grow wheat for the betterment of his fellow citizens than grow poppy for the betterment of his family in terms of income.
Yeah, you
so
can make 6 times as much.
Yeah, absolutely.
There were two takeaways. So we recently spoke to Rusty Bradley, and he wrote Lines of Kandahar. He was part of the SF-ODA at Burwangar. And he had one, he's like, most of those guys there, they don't even own the land that they're working on. They're paying for the privilege to work on the land. That land is owned by landowners in Pakistan. So that's one thing that stood out to me is that we're trying to tell people to plant different crops, but they don't even own the land. And the other thing was you made a really good point about it's more than tribal. It's familial. We made the mistake of assuming that all Pashtos are united together, one Pashto nation. That's just not the case.
No.
These guys hate these guys. They've lived over there for 100 years, and they killed his wife 20 years ago. He still holds a grudge.
Yeah,
they're not united. And there's a couple families in Kandahar that pretty much run the whole game. And if you're not in good with those families, you're not getting anywhere.
Well, Wally Karzai was the big power broker in Kandahar, and he's the brother of the friggin' president of the country. So he had free reign to do whatever the hell he wanted in terms of criminal enterprise in Kandahar city. And if you think for a second that our reconstruction contracts weren't intertwined with criminal enterprise in Afghanistan, you're awfully naive.
Well, not just the way it was, but also you're talking about also like other international governments, because I know when I got there at the beginning of 2008, and we were getting rocketed in Massengar all the time, we would find the remnants of it, and they were Chinese mostly. Chinese 107 rockets were usually shot at us pretty regularly, and we found them everywhere.
Yeah, but we also found Italian landmines in 2002.
we found some Russian, like the PMN and stuff like that. But what I mean is, like, there are governments that are working inside a disrupted nation that is being held by Western troops that these guys are smuggling through to get to that, and so it's not just the criminal.
Well, and then add in foreign international influence.
Yeah,
Somebody
exactly.
already mentioned the Iranians in Hatt. You got the Pakistanis with a vested interest in keeping Afghanistan destabilized because it prevents a threat from emerging on Pakistan's eastern border when they're already concerned about their border and their military confrontation with India. So, I mean, you got the Chinese want to muscle in through their little sliver of connection to Afghanistan. And then you've got all the Stan countries in the north, which are kind of doing their own thing, but you've got a lot of smuggling going on across the port's border.
Pakistan is the biggest issue. Like when when they would extract their casualties would go into Pakistan. That's why we took over Spin Baldak from the French SF guys on the border. The logistic routes were crazy. Like these, like how after we battle, we do a BDA, and then you find blood trails, but no fucking bodies.
Yeah.
Like these guys take them out right away, or
Spooky.
if you can't get in there for a while, everything's gone, and their wounded are gone. The wounded aren't being treated in Afghanistan; they're being put in fucking trucks, jingle trucks, sent to fucking Pakistan. So
well, it's interesting because
supporting countries is what's killing us. Like, holy shit! Like every fight all you guys have been in, you're like, where the fuck are they getting all the RPGs? Like, they got RPG factories in the fucking coast.
Pakistan, right in the mountains.
Well, there's stockpiles in Afghanistan. In 2002, when we took over the provincial governor's fortress that overlooks the capital town of Zalat in Zalat province, just immediately north. They had in that fortress, probably the entire Canadian Armed Forces stockpile of explosive devices, RPG rockets, and artillery shells dug into that fortress. I mean, everywhere you looked, there were just passages stuffed with RPG rockets. They had so much crap left over from the Soviet occupation for 10 years that they didn't need to be resupplied with Chinese rockets. They had everything they needed to prosecute the war right then and there. They already had it in 2002.
Yeah, I mean, they ran out of that probably somewhere around, I would say probably around 2008, 2010, and which is when they started making the switch away from Soviet munitions and landmines over to HME.
And we were seeing more HME, we were seeing anal, we were seeing all kinds of stuff, right? Like that was,
it became a lot more rare to be shot at with like an RPG or a recoilless rifle because they just didn't have a lot of that stuff.
The recoilless ones were actually, this is a funny story, but we found the Americans found some ordnance, so we got called out to deal with it, and it was RPG 7s, RPG 29s, which were very much newer and much more deadly, and then there were some 82 mil recoilless as well. And the moment we found those and brought them back to the unit, that got brought them back to Massengar, that got sent out to the Special Forces dudes, and the Special Forces dudes then had a little box drawn on a map, and that's where they went next. And like we had the sexy guys and the tech guys and the people that could actually exploit them immediately. So they would get back to a base, they would be able to do fingerprint, DNA analysis, like just go to town on it. And then you have Special Forces hits going on, like, we know exactly where this dude is, we're going over there. So
I mean, a lot of that stuff is literally purchased in an open market in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Like there's not as much mystery behind where this stuff comes from. Like you said, they knew where it came from. Like, oh yeah, it's this is the serial number. It was sold by a Chinese arms dealer to this guy in Pakistan, and he's the one that sold it, and this is his transfer point in the desert. This is his smuggling route. We know where he is. Like, they bring it all across the reg. They buy it in Pakistan, they throw it on a camel, they throw it on a jingle truck, and they bring it across. I mean,
tracking down blowpipe missiles and Stinger missiles from the bad old days of the Soviet occupation was interesting too. We were still actively chasing those down in 2002. In fact, I got given an expended Stinger missile tube that the Afghans were using. The local guerrillas or not guerrillas, the local militia were using in their defense of Kandahar airfield. Oh, and next thing I knew, there's an American CIA guy there with a briefcase full of $10,000 US cash, offering me $10 grand for this expired Stinger missile tube so that he can strike off the serial number. And
so both of those things went mysteriously missing, right?
Well, in my foolish haste to be a good ally and do the right thing, I just gave him the tube when I could have put $10,000 in the unit kitty, but it would have made for a hell of a fucking after tour party.
Great
That
beer
would be a
call,
great
yeah.
party. Yeah.
I mean, we were still chasing down blowpipes in 2017. Like that fight never stopped.
Yeah.
But I mean, I definitely, I'm sure it was a little bit more desperate in the early years when there were probably thousands of them wandering around. We're flying helicopters.
Well, the worry was C-17s coming into Kandahar airfield. Once we got the airfield up and running, was major threat to incoming aircraft. That's why we all did the deep dive coming in. Final approach was to try to avoid
Nothing
that
really
kind of thing.
prepares you for that either. Like they say we're going to do some combat maneuvers, but unless you've actually been in a plane that does combat maneuvers, nothing. It was quite an interesting experience. I remember coming in on the plane and they were like, all right, we're going to engage in combat maneuvers in 5 minutes. And you're like, okay.
You'll Afghan roller coaster.
Oh, God!
Vomit comment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got a question in the chat, and I'm going to post it to Corey first. I'll put it up on the screen. And was kind of how aware of the Afghan war is the Canadian population? What's the general perception? I'll let Corey go first.
Well, I would say during the heyday, they were very aware. In fact, mostly because of unfortunate incidents with our members getting injured. On my tour alone, I think there's 23 members. I accounted at least 23, almost a weekly ramp ceremony. So unfortunately, it was a big deal for us. I don't think we'd been involved in such a conflict where there was so much loss. So that was definitely tied into the public was riveted on this. Every week there'd be news, not so great about what was going on, people losing loved ones. And that was our biggest mission. We had a full force concentration. So we had the Navy, Air Force, and Army working together combined on this mission and this effort. We took over the Southern AO. It was a huge area of responsibility. So it was a daily thing on the news, and certainly at least up until probably 2010, a huge point of discussion and probably controversy from different sides of the house politically on our involvement there. So Canada was really tied in, and then not so much. It's quick. It's unfortunate to how quick people forget all the contributions that were done, and I think unfortunately, there isn't, I think, as big of a interest in Afghan vets as there is or was in World War II vets. It's almost like a lost generation. There's a ton of veterans that got out of the battalions after they came back and that we're still dealing with mental health and all sorts of initiatives. But definitely they were tied in at least up until 2010. 2006 probably would have been that flashpoint where things really heated up. Yeah. And when we actually started losing people, and then it really accelerated in the summer fighting seasons all the way through to 2010.
Yeah,
I have to interject here. I have to disagree with that point where at 2010 we started to disagree. I think it's territorial. So our tour in 06 was the first major combat tour at the time. Right, coming down from Kabul down to Kandahar to combat operations. Our entire brigade is based out of Edmonton, so all casualties, all deaths are reported on local news. So Edmonton was in tune. Alberta was in tune. Canada started getting in tune because they're seeing the ramp ceremonies and all that good stuff. Yeah. So I think it can take that locally as well, because the brigade is in Edmonton. I have to say, because I was in the Airborne Regiment with the Commandos in Petawawa. We never got written about. Then I was in the battalion in Calgary. We never got written about. Even when we were in Croatia and we lost a couple guys over there through fire, nothing was reported back in Canada. No one even knew we were in bloody Croatia.
That was deliberate suppression, though, on the part of the Canadian government.
Oh, true. And that because the Liberals, right?
Things are pretty wide open from 06 to 2010. They documented everything in the news. It was pretty, you're right, very documented.
True. And so locally,
and there was a problem with that too.
With Edmonton, all our casualties, once they left Germany, went to the University of Alberta Hospital. So it was very in tune in Alberta.
Yeah, and part of the problem here too, you talk about perception, and Corey, I think you mentioned it, but part of the problem was for every Canadian soldier we lost in Afghanistan, in the perception of the Canadian population, he died 3 times. He died once when they saw the ramp ceremony on the news. He died again when they saw the Highway of Heroes repatriation to Canada. And he died a 3rd time when he was finally buried with honors in his hometown. So 3 times each casualty was reported as a separate casualty, if you catch my drift.
That was so well said, buddy.
People didn't track the names. They tracked the fact there's been another casualty. And they heard about this same casualty 3 times over. So in the perception of the Canadian population, we probably had 3 times as many casualties as we actually had. But the other thing is, the Canadian population did not know about the wounded. We were a dirty little secret.
Yes.
I was shuttled home in the middle of the night. I arrived in Edmonton, no fanfare, no welcome. I was on a stretcher and shuttled off to the University of Alberta Hospital to undergo my surgeries. So, we smuggled the wounded home in the middle of the night. They didn't get any decompression. Went straight from combat 1 minute to waking up in a hospital the next, waking up back in Canada, undergoing a dozen surgeries. There was no welcome home. There was no fanfare. There was no nothing, not even a decompression.
Must have been horrible for everybody.
Yeah, they actually stopped televising the arrivals of soldiers that had passed away. There was highly controversial during the Harper government, where all of a sudden, because of the amount, they decided to stop doing it. And that was a controversial and contentious issue, because every ceremony had been covered up until then, including the passage down the Highway of Heroes. And then things started to ramp up, and all of a sudden government shifts policy to try and divert attention from this. So it was I remember that being highly contentious, especially with veterans who had already gone by, and that being an issue.
I don't want to take anything.
I think that's kind of
a concerted effort. Like they were trying to kind of tone it down to kind of start the process of getting people's mind off it so they could pull out easier with less public pushback, or
so they could maintain the campaign.
The interest in the conflict, I think.
They were worried about losing popular support. That was the key. They wanted to maintain Canada's commitment in Afghanistan, and they knew that the Canadian public is very fickle. The Canadian population has no stomach for combat casualties. That's why the wounded were kept a dirty little secret. We had six wounded casualties for every fatality, right? At least 6 to 8, because of the degree of combat medicine, the advancements in combat medicine. We had a lot more survivors of wounds that would have killed you in a previous conflict. We had a lot more people survive those wounds because of the speed with which they reached surgical aid, the golden hour, and all the rest of it. So at the end of the day, the Canadian government knew the Canadian population would balk at the number of casualties and bulk at the sight of these limbless people coming home and all the rest of it. So they hit it. They hit it from Canadian, it's too sensitive for the Canadian public. So they hit it away.
Very good points. And I have to say, I don't think we planned well enough for that. And my company was 138 men. I had 9 killed in action and over 30 wounded. And you're right, Mark. None of those 30 wounded were on the news.
No.
And here's the other issue of that was we knew we were going into a full combat mission, but we didn't have battle replacements ready. And so my first battle replacement was Caleb. Caleb's now a major. He was a private when he came to me. Now he's a major, and he's going back to 3 VP. And he's going to take over Airborne Company probably next year. Anyways, he arrived 2 months after the casualty. That's how unprepared we were. And then the casualty process was happening right away. But it took us 2 months to get our first casualty replacements. That's crazy.
Well, I mean, we were so unprepared in 2002. After we went on our first combat air assault, major combat air assault, as we were preparing to ramp up, we realized that we didn't have any ammunition to go with us. And so we requested emergency resupply from Canada. We bummed enough critical natures off of our American allies to go in and do the operation. but we did it with American ammunition. We didn't get that shipment of Canadian ammunition for the combat resupply, the emergency resupply, until the end of the tour 5 months later.
Yeah, Roger that.
That's how slow Canada was to react.
Yeah.
So I'm live right now on my Instagram, and Ashley Van Leeuwen was on mission with me in 06. He was wounded over there on one of our convoys. He's now RCMP. He just commented about the U of A comment I said, and what he said was this, and I think it's great. The medical care in Germany was different than the U of A. Germans knew we were combat casualties, where the U of A didn't differ between a car crash versus a combat casualty. So, yeah. So how was your care?
Oh, my care was brilliant. The medical care was great, but and all my care team knew who I was and where I'd come from. So I received top-notch medical care. I can't complain about that. And I received top-notch rehabilitative care in the form of the Glen Rose Rehab Hospital here in Alberta, which, as antiquated as it was and equipment starved as it was, had brilliant staff, and they made up for everything. So I got very good treatment and care, so insofar as losing your legs goes and recovering. But you're right in the sense that war veterans or combat casualties didn't get any sort of different treatment, nor should they, than a car crash accident, because everybody gets triaged on the basis of their injury. But it was weird coming straight from combat to being a casualty and watching the war from the other side on TV with a very intense vested interest in what was going on back in theater. It was tough row to hoe. And then finding out in your hospital bed that, oh, by the way, you've been financially stiffed by the federal government, who reduced your disability compensation by 40% in the middle of the war and didn't bother to tell anybody. Yeah.
Well, they told people. They just didn't tell the right people. That was the government was talking about it. I remember it was very quiet in 2006. Because I was doing my workout and I was doing my training, and we were getting all the heads ups from the training cadre about casualties and things that were happening, because these are all their friends, right? And but you could hear it on the news, and they were like, just so you'd we're switching to a new Veterans Affairs program, and that was about as far as they went. They just didn't talk about it.
No. There's the new Veterans Charter. It's got to be better than the old charter, right? Okay, right. Carry on.
Cool, done. Yeah, and then move on. And yeah, they did.
And none of us knew that they'd taken our disability compensation and reduced it by 40%.
Yeah,
so you wake up in your hospital bed, missing your friggin' legs, and the first fucking thing you find out is, oh, by the way, the government has fucked you royally in the ass.
Isn't that the way the government does things, though? That's just standards across.
No, this is above and beyond, dude.
No, they did. I know.
This is fuckery above and beyond.
Yeah, there
was some silliness. I remember a member lost his legs, having to justify every 2 years that his legs hadn't grown back. I still do that with the insurance company. Yeah. That's Manulife.
Are you sure, Mark? Are you sure they haven't grown back?
For sure. Last time I checked.
No, man, you're a sketchy
It's just
dude.
So crazy, you got to laugh at it. It's just the details on some of these policies.
Let's get back to Afghanistan here. We can talk about our government, complain about it for all day long, every day for the next while, because we have lots to talk about. But let's get back to Afghanistan. The one thing I wanted to ask each of you guys, I'm going to start with Corey, but he just disappeared, was change. We kind of touched on it a little bit about the different years that we were in here, and I just want to see from a personal perspective, what was your biggest change? For me, I remember watching at the beginning of tour in February, never seeing children, right? And it was, you might see them kind of poking around a corner or throwing a rock or from afar where they don't really know you're there. But near the end of tour, I was watching girls walk to school on their own with books in broad daylight, walking down the street, no big deal. And that was just in the local. So let's start with Corey. What were some of the major changes you saw from the ground, from the beginning to an end for your tour?
Oh, well, I did cut out there. I just jumped back in, but I think I have a pretty unique perspective in being that I jumped from 2006 when I first had come into tour, and then to the end of 2009. It was night and day difference from what I'd seen in terms of the prosperity, and certainly the relationship we'd had with the local civilization population. It went from getting rocks thrown at you occasionally, to just condemnation. People did not want you to be there on the first tour, and to the second tour, night and day difference. Kandahar, for example, had been completely changed. It was very prosperous. Even the Arghandab region, like before, war-torn, very poor. There's things of color returning. A lot of different kebab places, which have populated in Toronto as well. You see a lot of Afghan immigrants that have brought in their culinary expertise to the area. But there is a lot of prosperity. You could see the investments coming off from what had been laid down from our paving the roads and securitizing the areas to allow people to return to work and starting their own businesses again. The bank commerce, everything had increased, from foot traffic to just the color and diversity of everything that you saw, to the overall happiness and interactions we were getting on foot patrol compared to back in 06, where it was a really hot and intense combat zone, to kind of more friendly, where we'd have Americans. We had the 82nd with us out in the Arghandab picking up cases of Red Bull or the odd watermelon from some local vendor. Like, it was pretty friendly. So I was happy to see it. And in fact, from beyond that, when I came back, I actually worked at the Afghan embassy in Ottawa for the Afghans for about 6 months when I was looking for some work. So I got a really unique perspective there. And I'd say it was very positive.
Awesome. How about Tim? Did you see any major changes from the beginning of 06 to the end? And that was pretty much straight combat the whole way through, eh?
No, it was just full combat. And I think Mad Hatter had it right there, was when he saw the change later after 06. Because 06 was just pure fucking bullets flying, man. So really, we didn't see the effect.
Yeah. Mark, what about you? You were there.
Yeah,
for
big
change.
Big change in from between 02 and 08. Kandahar airfield itself grew from a small regional airfield hub that you could literally stretch an infantry battalion around to defend, to a small city of 10,000 people. So
concrete, no more shelters.
But with the growth of CAF came prosperity for the locals in terms of local jobs, in terms of spin-offs, in terms of property rentals to the coalition, on and on and on it goes, right? So the fact that CAF grew means that the area around CAF grew and became prosperous. So that was a huge shift. The second shift I saw was in relation to the locals, again, coming and going and around CAF, because I got out of CAF to Camp Hero a lot, because that was where the Afghans were based, and working with them, obviously. So back and forth we'd go. And once you left the air base on the first tour, I'll tell you what, outside literally the wire, there was a row of razor wire, and that was the thin red line defending the airfield, that and bunkers. And we were all in bunkers on a thin red line. And when you looked out, all you saw was the surface of the moon. As far as the eye could see, you could watch a dog run away for 3 days, and there was nothing going on. Nothing. The villages, the small villages that we incorporated into the defensive program for Kandahar Airfield to act as our tripwire, were hard scrabble villages. These were literally medieval villages, Planet of the Apes type architecture. And at the end of the day, when I saw it again 4 years later, 6 years later, a huge change in the Kandahar area. Big change. People coming and going, bazaars. They had the bazaar right there, the coalition approved bazaar right there at Kandahar Airfield, for God's sakes, where you could go get your cloned Martini Enfield or your made in Pakistan souvenir of Afghanistan. So big changes between 02 and 08.
Now here's the real question: how about yourselves? because I know from, like, I only did the one tour, right? So I can only talk about my 8 months that I was there. But I noticed, like, from the day I left, or the day I arrived in country, to the day I left country, I was not the same person after that, right? Like, I was,
Sorry, you weren't what?
I wasn't the same person.
Roger.
Like, I was green as green could be when I first got there, and I was not when I left. Let's jump back to Corey. What were some of the changes you noticed in yourself from tour to tour, or like, I know it's going to take some introspection, but
yeah, there's different stages of that, I guess, that I've gone through. And I think the most therapeutic thing for me was being able to do that climb in 2012 with True Patriot Love to the Himalayas. But I went through a lot of issues that I didn't talk about, that every soldier does. Is what they do when they come back is they lie and say everything's fine. And because you want to deploy again, you say exactly what you think they want you to hear. And despite, the massive weight loss, I explained that away and was still able to continue on a path that would have led me overseas again. And I think the biggest thing for me, after you've been in combat and you've been shot at, and when you've fired at somebody, there's it's almost like a drug, I guess, that goes off. You can't really unwind yourself in a way that you'll ever stop trying to chase that rush, where you're going to feel that need to basically keep moving, or that adrenaline rush. And you feel it through other things. Like, I love motorcycles, but they're healthy ways. Motorcycling is an amazing way, therapy wise, but getting out with a group of like-minded individuals, I'm always on the move and helping others, and I find it very therapeutic. But finding that calm, like, for me, I guess it was probably both the climb and having a family, having somebody that was by my side is probably, that didn't give up on me when I went through each stage, and that was there to recognize those issues. And I had a pretty good relationship with those in my platoon from back home to assess and help things. A couple old airborne sergeants that had recognized some things. The alcohol obviously was rampant. I think everybody can relate to that. And then it just took a while to normalize. After I think I got on the gun teams at where I work full time now, that was like where things really hit. After things came to a full stop and you couldn't basically run away from it anymore, you had to face those issues. That was really a dark time for me. And then after losing a few members to suicide, that was really a hard turning point, especially when I saw somebody had completed a suicide, the look of their daughter's face and the resilience in the family, seeing that go through, basically made that resolve and did the development of Mad Hatter Industries, where suicide is something that is unacceptable, that you won't allow to happen, and you create that community. Really, it's been a mission. So I think a lot of soldiers come back, or if they get out, they're looking for that other mission to keep going. That's what you have to do, is essentially pick yourself up and keep going, but also keep connected with like-minded individuals. The motorcycle community is really good for that. They're like-minded veterans of skydiving. I've been talking to Tim about getting my personal free fall course, and just really pushing yourself to get back out there, because a lot of veterans I know that are listening probably have been or are still not going out and getting involved with things because they're just sitting there, and it's really hard to get out there again if you're not trusting other people. Like, you have to be around like-minded people to be able to be related to and understanding. A psychologist can understand and listen, but if they haven't been there and don't know what you've been through, it's really hard to open up to them. Like, veterans are, how we are with trust. Like, once you let somebody in and you lose that trust, it's a big deal. So we have it, I think, upon ourselves and what we've gone through to help others, but also help ourselves. I think it really took maybe up until just recently to realize that you actually have to take time for yourself, as crazy as that sounds. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, cool. Well said.
Yeah, sorry about that. I wanted to echo your sentiment about opening up, because that's one thing that we've run into a lot is, people need to talk about this stuff. You need to talk about how these experiences made you feel and what kind of changes they've made on your life going forward. But like you said, the veteran community, it's all built on trust. So most of the time, the only person that you're comfortable talking to about these things are people that were there with you or that had the same type of experience or went to the same place. And it's comforting to see a lot more venues like this, not just our project, but I mean, there's tons of podcasts and there's, documentaries and, stuff where people are finally breaking the stigma of silence a little bit. And that's really encouraging to see. And I hope that has longstanding, effects and benefits.
Yeah.
For me, what about you, Tim? What was your what were the changes you saw in yourself?
For me was Croatia '94. We were in a couple of ticks there. We lost some guys in IEDs, which were mine strikes, but nothing reported back home. So the difference in our battle space there was if there was a lot of people, shit's going down range. So when I came home for leave, I went to a football game. I was just like, oh my fucking God, there's too many people here. I'm just like looking and scanning and doing my thing.
Yeah.
Afghanistan was different. But anyways, it is a thing that stays with you forever. Sight, smells, like when it gets super hot and that there's that smell, guys, that burning smell.
Yep.
You're just, I'm there. But sometimes it's a good thing. I'm just like, when I'm out riding my motorcycle and it's smoky and shit, I'm like, oh, this feels good. When it's
Brings
early
you
in the
home.
morning, you're like, oh, yeah, this is cool. I love it. For my son who went in 08, my son and I were the only, for Curtis, you didn't know, my son and I are the only father-son snipers while serving in Canadian Forces history. And my son, so for the younger vets, I feel worse for. Like for guys like Mark and I, Mad Hatter, like we had our warm-up stuff. But here's my son goes into the Army, and a year and a half later, he's in Afghanistan as a sniper. Like, holy shit. So, yeah, he's a mess, and now he's a search and rescue, PJ instructor. And, but we're having a heat wave right now in British Columbia, so I put the big air conditioner up in his room so he could sleep because he loses his shit. For me, same thing. So, my issue is, my PTSD issues are this, and it's kind of funny, and probably everybody has it, is if I put a timing in my head, like I need to work out at 10 o'clock, and I miss that timing by 10 minutes, I can't work out again for the rest of the day because my mind was set on 10 o'clock. That is it. That's when I'm doing it. And that is the same thing for any other timing. So I think that's kind of weird, but maybe do anyone else have that issue?
Oh, you could ask the wife every time. And now it's become a point of humor. She knows what's going on. But when I just freak out about the most ridiculous thing, it's just because it's just one of those things. And it has nothing to do with her. It's completely just something that comes out of nowhere. That's why you get on the bike and you go for a ride and just clear your mind or do what you can, work out, whatever it is that you find that is therapeutic for you. That's the thing. You have to find that thing for yourself. And that's really what our goal is with MHI is helping people get to that.
I'm so lucky. My wife and I have been together for 38 years. And that's like my whole infantry career, my policing career being in executive protection, where I was away all the time. And she's amazing. And she grounds me. So it's like, okay, what's going on? Think about it. What's happening? Okay, now defuse. So it's really cool. And my son and I, and his buddy Gavin, who's a friend of mine, we're all snipers. We're all combat vets. We're going for a helicopter jump tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So that's our escape. That's our way of like, I just love the sound, the smell of the parachute, the sound of the aircraft, the wind blowing, the jet fuel. And that just gets me grounded again, right?
Where's that, Tim? Is that Campbell Skydive with Rob?
Yeah, Campbell River Skydive, and that's owned by Rob McNeil, who's was my boss in Pathfinder Platoon, and his other
Amazing
partner is
person.
as a search and rescue technician, master warrant officer. So they own that drop zone.
Yeah, I would. You mentioned the guys that went straight over there and didn't have any kind of lead up. That was me. You know, I graduated basic training on February 2nd, and I was in Afghanistan on March 17th.
That's so hard. So hard.
So it was a lot of very quick learning. And, you know, I also echo your sentiment about your time. You know, if I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this thing, if it requires me getting off my butt and going somewhere, if I'm not there early, forget it. Like if I'm going to be late, it's not even worth it.
Exactly. Yes.
If I'm going to be to work late, I might as well call in sick to work. You know,
Ruins the whole day. Yeah.
Yeah, it throws everything off. And in addition to those, the one thing that I brought home for me, or actually what I left in Afghanistan, was my patience. I left it there. You know, my patience for other people, my patience for my family, my patience with myself. You know, my fuse was much shorter. I'm not like an angry guy, but, you know, it's just that where before I was a lot more understanding and accommodating and patient. A lot of that, you know, that just got left there. So
I would interject one thing that I found. I had the exact same issue, and a really good revelation, if anybody ever wants to try this, is trying to learn how to make your own apparel. And the shirt you see Tim is wearing has taken a couple of years anyways to get to that level. So learning how to make in silkscreen shirts or anything you do that takes time will give you that patience. And I found it very therapeutic. So this is one of our first version shirts. But basically, Dave Ward from Bushwookie, we talk a lot about the frustrations of being a vetrepreneur and just working through these problems that you have as you're navigating your way through life has been really a great therapeutic way I found. Also working with other vets and connecting with them, which has been a really great addition, because I think, as Chance had said, we are in a veteran renaissance, but working your way through those things does give you patience. And it's really in a positive way when you get in a good groove and you finally do see those results, that it's super rewarding. But I don't know if I'd recommend it for everyone, because I've ruined a ton of shirts, but it is it's a super rewarding thing, and it does reward you with patience. It doesn't have to be that. It could be some other hobby or anything that you're interested in. When you find that time to develop it, it certainly helps. And I know there's some legions that have the vets with they're making models. I think there's some great initiatives out there that really need to be recognized and funded furthermore, but that's a great way to do it. And then also having kids really changes your life. That's been a huge life-changing experience for me.
Sure.
And I like to just say about your veteran business is I enjoy wearing this stuff and promoting this stuff. And I don't want any money. I just want to enjoy, like, these guys are making the sacrifice to do this. So Mad Hatter sent me a bunch of shirts. I jump them and do all these cool things and try and sell them. And that's my thing, is that's what makes me feel good, is to push the products of all our fellow veterans. I just love it. So I put a post out the other day going, hey, all these companies, who wants me to jump your flag? I'll skydive your flag, and you guys get the, like, under canopy, have it flying underneath me. So a bunch of them have go, hey, yeah, we'll send you something. And then once I'm done with that, they get the pictures to promote their product. And then I'm going to hang all those flags in our hangar, where hundreds and thousands of civilians are going to see these flags hung in the hangar and go, what the fuck is this? And they're going to go and buy something. So I think all this stuff is very positive. And it gives me a mission focus. My mission focus is I love to jump out of planes, and I'm going to, at the same time, promote these veterans.
Yeah.
Do what you love and love what you do.
Yes.
So what about Mark? What were some changes that you saw in yourself when you came back?
What didn't I see? I was half the man I used to be. The mobile infantry made me everything I am today. The fact of the matter is, I had to fundamentally reinvent myself. In the space of an instant, I lost my entire identity, my entire adult life. I was a professional soldier for 34 years, infantry soldier, then an officer, and that was all gone in an instant, in a heartbeat, in a flash of heat and light, and that was it. It was over. And it took me a while to catch up with that fact from my hospital bed. But let's face it, you're not jumping out of airplanes and humping a rucksack through the mountains with no fucking legs. So it was over. That was over. And I had to leave that life behind. And that was a difficult thing to do when everything you are everything you identify yourself as, everything you believe yourself to be, is centered around that piece of identity. I'm a soldier, and to lose that in the space of an instant, and to have to leave what you love behind, not on your own terms, is an extremely difficult thing to have to deal with. And it's a psychological burden. I can't even begin to imagine to explain the degree to which it affects you. So I had to undergo a fundamental revision of who I was. I had to reinvent myself, and I had to reinvent myself as a severely disabled civilian moving forward with my life in Canada. People don't look at me, even in a military community where I live, like St. Albert, which is half friggin' military. People don't look at me and assume I'm a veteran of the Afghanistan war. They assume I got in a car crash somewhere or something, some industrial accident, because it just doesn't resonate with people anymore, right? We're 12 years out of Afghanistan, and that's history. People put that in the rearview mirror. Well, it's not in the fucking rearview mirror for me. In fact, it's in my fucking face every fucking time I wake up and realize once again that I have no fucking legs. So I had to reinvent myself, and that was difficult to do. You talked about finding, meaning in new activities and things like that. It's all about finding purpose. That's the fundamental issue here, is finding a new purpose to carry you forward. In Mad Hatter's case, that's making clothing and silk screening T-shirts. That's great. In other people's case, that's marketing something different, or marketing themselves as inspirational speakers, what have you. I didn't do any of that. I chose to find my new purpose initially in veterans advocacy, and specifically advocating for the wounded who had been disadvantaged by the 40% reduction in our disability compensation, thanks to the government of Canada. And so I decided it was incumbent upon me, as the senior, then still serving wounded guy, and then the senior retired wounded guy, to look after the junior soldiers who were victims of this fucking goddamn insurance scam on the backs of all of our injured soldiers. So I made it my mission to try to rectify some of the major problems I had personally experienced, and some of the battles that I had experienced in dealing with our Veterans Affairs, which was completely an organization, a bloated bureaucracy, completely out of touch with its actual official and original mandate, which was caring for wounded troops. Now Veterans Affairs exists to promote Veterans Affairs. Completely different kettle of fish. And so I fought that battle for 7 fucking years, including a class action lawsuit against the government of Canada, which ultimately we were unsuccessful in because the Supreme Court of Canada declined to hear our case, arguing that it was not in the national interest, when it clearly was. But they're all judges beholden to the government of the day, right? So you can't get justice in Canada. There's a legal system, but there's no justice system, and you got to understand that. But anyhow, I did the advocacy thing for about 7 years, and then my class action lawsuit came to an end, and just a number of things fell into place where I no longer felt the need. I was able to back away from that, what had been a pretty public persona during my years of advocacy. I was on the news quite often and things like that as a spokesman. So I wanted to leave that behind and just focus on my family. And really, that is my purpose in life now, is to make sure that my family is taken care of and that my kids get a good start in life. They're in their early 20s now, both of them, still living at home. And yeah, that's my entire purpose, is to take care of the family that, one, I honestly probably neglected during most of my military service, because I considered myself a soldier, and soldiering came first and the needs of the service came first, and my family suffered as a result, as most military families do. If nothing else, they suffered from benign neglect. But the fact of the matter is, now I can devote 100% of my time and remaining intellect to my family. So that's my mission, that's my purpose, and that's my focus. And so far, so fun. It's working out well. I consider myself now successfully retired. My military life is in another life. It's parked. It's in its little fucking box in its compartment. I take it out and show it to the right people, but not to everybody. And as far as my neighbors are concerned, I'm just a guy with no legs who lives next door. and I'm happy with it that way. I'm happy to be incognito.
Sure. And I think it's important that we, that's the goal, really, is that we all find this space where we can
This
put
purpose.
it on its shelf. Your military experience was something that, for a lot of guys, it still defines them and they can't let it go. But I feel like real peace is where you can be like, you know what? This was a big part of my life. It's on the shelf. I can open, like you said, I can open it up and I can show it to people and I can look at it. But I do other things now. I'm in a different part of my life.
I didn't have a choice, Curtis. That was the thing for me. I think a lot of guys that are stuck in army mode are stuck because they weren't forced to leave it behind necessarily. It's still in their minds, right? They still see themselves as warriors in some form, fashion. Me, I didn't have that luxury, if you want to call it that. I didn't have that option. It was taken away from me when they took away my legs. I had no choice. I mean, it was evident to anybody who looked at me that I could no longer be a soldier. And I was probably the last guy to realize it, but the realization came pretty quickly for me too. So I was forced to reinvent myself. I went down, I did all those things. They couldn't get my meds sorted out. I was in all sorts of pain from traumatic amputation. Phantom limb pain defines my life in many ways. I'm on all kinds of medications, including methadone as my primary painkiller. And at the end of the day, it is what it is. But there's something to be said for having to reinvent yourself, because being forced with your back against the wall forces you to change and evolve or die, right? Adapt and overcome or die. It's that simple. And those were the choices I was left with. I was down in the bottom of a bottle, packed myself off to rehab when I realized that I was making life untenable for my family, and overcame that particular hurdle, parked that in a box on the shelf. And, and every hurdle I overcame was another notch in my gun belt, so to speak, my new civilian gun belt, learning to sit ski, taking on challenges with adaptive sports, hunting, fishing, figuring out how I'm still going to do all those things with the help of a few friends. All that stuff was critical in reinventing myself and giving myself a new identity and lifestyle. Yeah. But you're right. But a lot of guys are stuck in the past because they haven't been forced to change.
That's true.
That's a good point, and I have to to explain myself on that one. So for me, I was a little bitch, and I got posted to tow anti-armor as a sergeant major there. I'm not anti-armor. I'm airborne. Airborne company was missing a sergeant major for 6 months, so I should have been the guy going there. But I got replaced so they could push this other guy so he could go overseas. So I was so unhappy, and I got pushed into the Armored Corps as an infantry sergeant major. I'm wearing a black beret with my infantry cap badge. And I'm like, fuck this shit. I'm getting fucked here. And of course, the PTSD is there. So I'm like, I'm out. So I found myself a job. I left the Army on January 4th, 2008, and started my recruit course for the Alberta Sheriffs on Monday. So I get into there, and then I'm in another paramilitary organization where we're being beasted and we're doing all this good shit. Then I go into executive protection where I'm working 18-hour days. 1 meal a day was like being back in recce platoon. So I never lost my identity. Then I became the sergeant major of the sheriffs. So I'm doing all the parades and all this other. It was just like still being in the Army. I did that for 13 years. I just retired. And I'm still in that fucking mode. So I haven't had the ability to go, I'm a fucking civilian yet. I'm just so, I'm so in your fucking face. And my son's still in. He's, being a PJ, being pararescue. I don't know how to get out of it. Should I get out of it? I don't know.
You have to get out of it. I mean, if all your friends are still military or ex-military and you surround yourself with those kinds of guys, there's a reason we bond tribally as soldiers and continue to trust in each other after we take the uniform off. And that's because of shared experience and shared adversity and innate understanding of each other. Sebastian Young writes quite a bit about it in his book Tribes, and it's worth a read. as to why we identify. But if you surround yourself with those kinds of people and those support mechanisms, nobody's saying you have to take the warrior suit off, the warrior persona off. I think it's with you for life. If you're a true warrior, that's going to follow you to Valhalla. That's just the way it is. And there's no taking the soul. You can take the uniform off the soldier, but you can't take the soldier out of the man. That's just the way it is.
Let's just look at your background. You got like when our government and the Biden's government collapses, we're gonna fucking come to your house. Like, look at that background.
And rule the world.
Those weapons, yeah. Yeah, Mark, you pointed out a really good topic there when you pointed out adversity. One of the biggest things, greatest things about the military is the adversity you go through, but the diversity and inclusion of how everybody comes from different walks of life. You're all equally worthless joining in the forces. Those friends you make and the experiences you go through, I think it'd be very remiss to point out the fact that not only are you doing unique things, like at 24 years old, calling in airstrikes and having the power of God's your hand to bring, like, that's an experience you can't really ascribe to anybody else who hasn't been there. They won't understand. But without the friends that I made, like Tim, one of your members as well, Craig Taranjo, he was one of my expedition mates. Right below me, the guy had lost a hand after he pulled a DD. It exploded. The primer wasn't set properly. Craig was below me. Frank DePere was above me. And for those that had never met him, Frank had the best attitude on life. He'd been blown up by a suicide bomber, survived, lost like 4 liters of blood, lost an eye, couldn't feel, like maybe 40% of the strength gone in the left side of his body. I remained friends with this guy, but he was above me. Craig was below me. With a group of people like that, even climbing up the mountain in thin air, wanting to give up, I never would have. And all those experiences you go through, you carry through with you those relationships. They never end. And those are one of the greatest assets. And I think one of the most positive things about the forces, not only are we there to do good, but that friendship and bond you make, that continues on outwards as well after you get out. But those are one of the most, certainly one of the most beneficial things about those unique experiences we go through, and honoring the lives of those that don't continue on. It's really important to remember those experiences we've been through with them. And, we talk about, Tim, you're talking about how you maybe still have that Army Sergeant Major in you, and that's been way of you for so long. But all those like-minded people, it's really beneficial to take that time, and this is what we're doing right now. This is like the virtual campfire. We're getting around and talking about these stories, bringing in all these other people that I'm sure are relating to a lot of the things that we're saying here, and reaching out. Like, the message here we have is, what if there's any issues, to reach out. I'm sure anyone on here is approachable to talk to others that would like to be talked to, or that want to relate and speak out. We're all there for each other, and the same thing goes for anybody listening. But to let people know they're not alone. That mission continues and maybe changes a bit, but we're still there and we're doing our thing. We're still pipe hitting and still being who we are. That's deep down who we are and what made us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really well said, man. And I don't think there's any better kind of point to wrap this thing up on. But what I wanted to give you guys a chance to do is talk about what you guys are doing right now. So Corey, obviously you've got MHI going. I'd like to give you a chance to talk about that and kind of roll through with everyone with their ventures or their hobbies, or kind of anything they'd like to say before we hop off.
Yeah, so real quickly, we have the a community-based initiative, really. So the apparel, it is a apparel-like business, but that's not really what it's about. It's about a community of like-minded individuals subscribing to the fact that no way will they ever commit suicide or allow their battle buddy to do so. But we're there to help the mental resiliency. Mad Hatter Industries, or MHI, could be ascribed to mental health initiatives or motivating, helping, inspiring. So we're online. We're on Instagram as Mad Hatter Industries. I'm out there wherever I can to have anybody that's dealing with anything to reach out to me directly, but also get that professional help to advocate for what's needed. And we're essentially that supplement to that, is a lot of people, as you can relate, if you've been through those the psychologists and those prescribed therapeutic treatments, it isn't enough. It isn't adequate having that 1 hour a week. if you even get that. Things have gotten a lot better, I'll say, with the forces. But in the day where I was out on my first tour, things were a lot different, and there's a lot of different ways that we dealt with that. So I guess the big takeaway is for everyone listening to know that you're not alone. We're out there, and we're all part of that community helping each other. And there is a lot of like-minded individuals, not just veterans, first responders, civilians as well, that are dealing with those mental health and resiliency issues. And we're there to help inspire and find that passion inside of you to make you happy, to get you even before you get to that point where you're even considering suicide, to help get you to that point of wellness where you're doing what you want to do, finding that new mission. And that's what we're about.
Awesome. And that's please send me a message afterwards so I can put some links under this so that people can find you and your website and your links. What about you, Sgt Major?
Yeah, for me, it's just, working on myself. So I retired. I didn't want to retire, but I got sick last year. I almost died, and I had to leave my job. So I moved out here to Comox, BC, where my son is. And so I'm just working on myself, being with my boy, my granddaughter, my wife. And I'm skydiving up in Campbell River, who's, a Pathfinder, and he's the other guy's a pararescueman. They own the DZ, so I'm just immersed in that. But what I like about that is, before I go there, was I love the veteran stuff. So like I said, I'm pushing the veteran products. It makes me feel happy that I'm pushing fellow Canadian stuff away. Like, these guys are taking the risk and working hard, and it just makes me feel good that I get to do this, but I don't have to do the risk they're doing. So I feel like I'm helping them, and that makes me feel good. And then jumping at the drop zone, like the civilians that are up there are just amazing, and it's they loving the Army stuff. And there's a civilian jumper up there. He lost both his lower legs. In skydiving, there's a thing called swooping. So you come in with a very small canopy. You're coming at about 90 kilometers an hour, and at the last minute, you're fucking flaring, and then you skip across the ground. This guy lost his lower tib and fib, both legs. He's still jumping today and teaching with fucking springy feet, and he just won Athlete of the Year for disabled. Wow. So these kind of people just fucking inspire me, and I just love being around these positive people. So for me, all I'm doing is trying to work out, stay sane, getting help, being with my boy, being with my granddaughter, helping the veteran businesses, and jumping out of planes. Very simplistic.
It sounds.
And I gotta get out of. But one thing I have to work on is I can't enjoy myself. So even though those are the things I enjoy, I can't smile. I'm not like when I'm on the aircraft and everyone's like, "Yeah, this is awesome." I'm like, because I'm so training scars from the Army that you can't have fun when you're jumping out of a plane. Keep a fuck off face on. And my executive protection job for 13 years was fuck off face. So I don't smile. So everyone gives me the gears for like, you're not smiling. So I have to work on the smile. Simple stuff. Like, thank God, I don't have to go through what Mark goes through. And my hat's off to Mark. I fucking love Mark so much. And I had the privilege to be at the range with Mark. And just watching this guy, when Mark is shooting, oh my God, the fucking face on him, the eyes on him, that guy is so focused. That guy would have been a good sniper, but he's a goddamn officer.
Yeah, my mistake.
All right, what about you, Mark?
Well, I'm a little older than a lot of our vets. I had a full career as an infantry officer, so I'm really working on myself in retirement, medically induced retirement, I guess, but retirement nonetheless. So I'm trying to enjoy what the other side of 50 is supposed to look like, Freedom 55, and I'm really focused on the family. And I'll tell you why. It's because, adversity has been mentioned here, and how the military trains you to deal with adversity. And that's what really got me through the loss of my legs, was the fact that, oh, here we go, another challenge is put in front of me, another life challenge, only this time it's a big one. But I mean, the military had trained me to deal with adversity throughout my career, right? Every time you get good at something, just when you get comfortable, they jerk you out, throw you into a new job, and throw a bunch of bullshit at you to keep you on your toes. And that's a good thing, because it keeps you developing as a person and keeps you engaged. The thing is, though, my family never got any of that adversity training that I got for over a 35-year career in the infantry. And so when I was injured, it was devastating for my family. My children were, 13 and 11 at the time. They were wiped out. I mean, my son saw his own personal superhero laid low with his friggin' legs gone. So it was a big wake-up call for my children, and it was devastating for my wife. Even though I could have suffered similar injuries in a car crash on the Yellowhead Highway, tomorrow, the fact of the matter was it happened under dramatic circumstances, and it was traumatic. The family had to fly to Germany in case I croaked before I got back to Canada, and all that stuff. So it was devastating for my family. My kids are still seeing, and my wife are still seeking mental health treatment as a result of it. I'm in a better place probably than my family is. My family members are. So my job, as I see it, is to work on the family and to alleviate as much stress in their lives as I can. If that means I drive the wife around running errands during the day, then that's what I do. And I wait in the car and surf the internet while she's off getting groceries or what have you. That's my job. My job is to serve and service my family, to make up for the 35 years or so that they let me go off and be a soldier and play war. So my responsibility is singularly focused and exists on the family. That's what the guns are for, to sort out, defend the family. That's what I continue to train myself to remain vigilant and sharp for, is to protect the family, and to do the sheepdog thing. Even though I'm in a wheelchair, I can still be handy in my own little way. So it's all about family for me, and the larger family, still the veteran community. I'm not involved in formal advocacy anymore, but I'm certainly advocating for individuals that are suffering or having difficulty. So I counsel, a handful of veterans who have approached me over the years, and I'm always willing to take on more baggage, as it were. Not baggage is the wrong word, but to take on more responsibility for helping others. So I'm available on Facebook for anybody who wants to look me up. I'm not hiding. I don't use pseudonyms. Mark Campbell is my name, and that's how you'll find me on Facebook. So anybody who's looking to connect is more than welcome to do so. I welcome that thing, because to me, the more people I know within the veteran community, it just enriches the life experience. So it's a good thing, and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Awesome, fantastic. Well, with all that being said, I would want to thank you guys again for coming on and joining us on the podcast. Again, really, really great to hear a variety of viewpoints and experiences, and kind of get a view behind the maple leaf, as it were. So you guys are welcome to join us on the live broadcast anytime. Just shoot me a message and we'll bring you on. So thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Curtis,
Thank
man.
you.
It was a real privilege. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the pleasure is mine.
Thanks,
Right on.
Curtis.